Here, coming at you today with a video that is going to be a little bit more introductory in nature. Uh, Today, we're going to take a look at some Star Wars Unlimited tech and looking at the opening play. We talked a little bit about leaders, how they operate, what they do. This is a little bit more focused on your early game and kind of how you can open to an advantage in the Jump to Lightspeed era. Um, First off, before we begin, a couple of things to note on the channel. There are several videos out here that include leaders and leader abilities and decks that are Jump to Lightspeed focused. There are a couple of older leaders that are included on some of those videos as well. I'd encourage you, if you haven't, to go back and take a look at them. Um, Second, there is a video up on the channel right now that, depending on when you're watching this, is a box break and opening packs for the Jump to Lightspeed Carbonite edition. And we're doing a giveaway with that. So if you're watching this and it's still March, you still have time. Go ahead and take a look over at it and enter to win. Third, if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. It does really help out with the reach of the channel and gives me more reason to continue doing this. Anyway, what are we going to see here? We're going to talk about drawing. We're going to talk about generating threat, using your leader abilities and how to maximize them from turn one. A little bit about the cold open. What am I trying to do with turn one? And then play lines into turn two. Where are we trying to go from our start? What are we doing next? As far as the draw goes, you can't play without the cards, right? And so any game is determined by the math of how I get to the things that are in my opening hand. With this set, we have the ability to draw between 5 and 9 cards. 6 is still going to be your standard, but you can wind up with the Colossus, a 35 health base that draws just 5 in your opening hand, or the Nabat Village, which allows you to draw 9. So you're drawing 10% of you're drawing almost 12.5% of your deck, something like that. It's been a while since I looked at that math. You're drawing a large portion of your deck, and 16.5. I can do math in my head, and putting some of it back, but you don't get the opportunity for a mulligan. And so the success of your opening hand, one of the things that you have to kind of keep in mind as you're building a deck is that success does not necessarily rely on a unit. What do I mean? I mean, there are plenty of decks and plenty of ways out there that playing an event the first turn or claiming the initiative might be your best opening play. But really what you want to try and do as you're building your deck is to maximize open-ended play so that into a wide field, just however you happen to be showing up, you're able to take what your deck gives you in your opening hand and have multiple avenues for playing beyond that. And that can mean either that you have kind of a balance of your opening plays that are ground and space so that you could lane dodge, a thing that Sabine did quite a bit in the opening sets. Or it might mean that you really push to take control of one lane or another, something that Django did in the last set. And remember that initiative is always an option. There are plenty of blue decks, plenty of control decks that one of their best plays was to just push things out to the next turn. They've got a ton of 3-cost removal. They've got a ton of ways to interact with you next round, and they'd rather go ahead and draw the card, be first, eliminate whatever it was you played in round 1, and go from there. Ambush units in yellow also allowed something kind of similar there to kind of mop things up pretty quickly and allow you to just kind of move on with the game. I would encourage you, if you haven't, take a look at the Changing the Math Part 2. That looked at all 4 rare bases and a little bit of the math behind drawing. If you really want to look it up, you can enter a lot of things like that into a hypergeometric calculator. It is not a lot of fun to do, but if you're looking for very competitive play, it's something that you might want to look into. So turn one. Turn one, we should look at generating threat. And how do we put down something on the board that has a strong board presence? Value plays mean that you are putting something on the board with big numbers to it, something that can attack fairly strongly on the next round. Um, the reason that the corporate defense shuttle is on here, actually, corporate defense shuttle and fireball are here, kind of as a nod to Kazuda, uh, because he can turn off either of their abilities. A 3/5 is by far the largest set of stats that we have on a turn one play. Um, you know, next to it is the old standard of the highest stats that you had, which is a 3/3 battlefield marine, and getting 2 extra stats on your turn one play is just monumentally bigger. But it's really only useful if I can swing with it. Same thing with Rampart. Rampart is a great ship to drop, but it doesn't ready unless you've got 4 power on it. And then Fireball, a 2 cost ambush unit. You can drop this in and immediately take something out in space that's even up to a 3 health unit. But you're hoping that you've got your leader right, because that's really the best play that you can have if you can turn off the ability to damage itself. The other thing that we can do is that we can create a controlling presence, something that demands an answer. Really, there's not a better card out there right now in aggression than General Pride. Why is he so good? Because if I'm on the initiative and I drop him first thing in the game, you either need to be able to answer a 3 right now or take initiative, because he really kind of curtails your opponent's opening play. If he gets off an attack with initiative, he's going to deal indirect damage, and anything that he deals indirect damage to, he can strip upgrades out of. And so he's a very board controlling play. So is Director Krennic, but Krennic is a little bit more durable because he's shielded. There's another strong the emphasis of a strong opening play is that you can do things like decide a game very early. I put on here kind of a preview from a slide down the road, but something like a Y-wing or any 2 cost or 1 cost ship, for that matter, in heroism, if you're sitting across from green, demands an answer right now, because it threatens to play Chewbacca the next round, and that really, really can turn the screws. Leader ability. A lot of our abilities as leaders can be accessed from turn one. If you look at the leader video that I've got on this channel, you'll see that some of them are static. Some things are always active. Down there at the bottom of the list, something like Gar Saxon, you now have a critical mass of shielded units. You could easily play Gar Saxon entirely shielded and have enough units in yellow-blue to be able to build out your deck with everything that comes in with a shield and holding on to that +1 static. Sabine, something like hitting your ping versus taking initiative. And you can always ping somebody first, see what they do. Have the opportunity to lane dodge afterwards. Quinlan Voss or Cad Bane, do you play your unit first, or do you hold off, ping, and then use something like Tarkentown, because both of them tend to do that, and take control of the board that way? Han from Spark of Rebellion can put down a resource and play a 3-drop. He can play a Falcon turn 1 and go ahead and swing in for 3. Kira can do things like drop down a Hylabon Enforcer, immediately shielded, and wind up with a shielded 3/2 that's sitting there for the next turn. And then we also have things like the rare bases. Now, Tarkentown is probably the best example of something that you could use turn 1, unless you're using something like ECL, in which case you might want to crash into that 2 or 3 health space unit if you're sitting across from heroism that has green. But knowing how to use Tarkentown to your advantage to clear the board, to get things out of your way so that you have a clean board to play into and kind of keep things small, especially for those leaders that like to ping, is a good part of the function of knowing how to set up your early game. Then we also have the cold open. So what are some of the strongest openings that you have? How do we activate our leaders right away and make a threat with those leaders right away? Well, again, we're going to look at just the Jump to Lightspeed leaders now. So Boba Fett, we have both the Hotshot V-Wing And the reckless gunslinger, we also have things like daring raid, or if they go to space, shoot down. Any of those will deal non-combat damage. The hotshot V-wing will deal damage to itself. The reckless gunslinger will deal damage to a base. All of that allows you to activate Boba Fett's ability turn one. Thrawn, something like Director Krennic, which we already talked about a little bit, is a shielded unit, which then discounts your when defeated. So you can put down Krennic and then put down one of the First Order stormtroopers in the same turn. You can also do that with some of the command units. And if you look at the Thrawn decks that I've got on here, the revision of Thrawn that I put up recently, you'll see a green and a red version of this. The red version likes this Krennic play. The green version is a little bit more about putting down your units that you can sacrifice, and it has many things that are already just one cost. But I'd encourage you to go take a look at that one if you want more information. Poe. Poe is a great opening for him is to put black one on the table because you're threatening, because Poe is already there, you're threatening to drop him in as a pilot and really activate some of those abilities. Wedge can do a lot of things right out of the gate. Wedge in yellow is able to put down a 1-cost ship, put a 2-cost pilot in it, and put R2 aboard. And so you can wind up with a nice big fat unit sitting out in space, turn one ready. Now, I wouldn't want to do that against blue because you risk immediately somebody 2 or 3 for wanting your ship. But that is a solid play if you're not worried about that ship being shot down. And then Phasma I wouldn't say that there is critical mass yet, but there is a strong amount of first order tribal that we have now. And so we have the ability with Phasma to, like Sabine, get a ping on base just from playing our cards. And we don't have to do anything extra. And unlike Sabine, that ping doesn't come back to us. And so we can play a first order card, activate her ability, ping a base. And General Pride, who we listed previously, is a great example of one of these that you can put that out there, and then your opponent has to decide, do I grab the initiative now? And if I do, okay, ping the base. So you can activate her ability turn one. And then, we're not going to go turns 3, 4, 5, but we're going to talk about where do I go next. So the goal of a strong opening play is to make a solid turn 2 play and begin applying pressure to the board, either as controlling the board or damaging the base. The two major things that you can do in your opening rounds to kind of establish the flow of the game and the things that you want to be able to do with your deck. So here's a couple of examples of strong opening play lines. The first one I actually used, I pulled this off in one of my pre-releases. I went 3-0 in that pre-release, and the finals of it, I put down a TIE bomber on turn 1, and that didn't activate Boba's ability, but I put a dual laser cannon on it on turn 2, and for 3 turns I wasn't uncontested in space, but there was really nothing that they could do because I had a 2/6 ship. It damaged every ship that it saw. It swung for 2 on its own. It did indirect for 3, and then Boba tapped for another indirect. And so you dealt 6 damage to the board, or 6 damage to the board if there was nothing in front of it, and a 7th if there was a ship there, or an 8th if there were 2 ships there. And so you really had an intimidating TIE bomber that I've got 4 resources dedicated to. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, any space unit in Hero that's paired with green threatens Chewbacca as a pilot, and Chewbacca is probably the best turn 2 play that anything Heroism Green has if they've got a ship in space. I used the Y-Wing as an example because it becomes a 4/6 that can't be defeated by card abilities and can't be bounced to hand, and adds 3 indirect. And so you pop Chewbacca on this thing, and if they didn't deal with that immediately, or they can't deal with it right now, it's going to swing for 4. It's going to do 7 total to the board. And that's 1 more than the bomber has unless there is another ship in front of it. And then my final example here is something like the Guerrilla Soldier. Because I've used several other examples, but the Guerrilla Soldier is a turn 2 play. But it's a turn 2 play that I can, if I play it into an open board, um, I can ready it because I'm going to do up to 3 damage if they've got 2 health on the board and nothing else. Then that 3 indirect damage all has to be accounted for, and so I can defeat the unit that's there and ready the soldier. So these are just a couple of examples. I'm sure you probably have some of your own. Let me know what you've come up with in the comments, and we will see you next time.